It took Ned Stark over 2 months in King's Landing to figure out what was going on with Jaime and Cersei some time before him. Stannis had worked it out, as had Jon Arryn and apparently countless others. Are we truly to accept that Tywin didn't know? Well, let's break this down, since Jaime and Cersei had been near, so to speak, indeed as children beneath their father's claimed roof, if you can say Casterly Rock has a roof. Jaime recalls that even as children they would crawl into each other's beds and sleep with their arms laced together long before his sister blossomed or the onset of his own masculinity. They had seen female horses and stallions in the fields and dogs in the kennels, and played at doing the same. When their mother's servant caught them at it, he did not recall exactly what they had been doing, but whatever it was had shocked Lady Joanna. She sent the housekeeper away, moved Jaime's bedchamber to the other side of Casterly Rock, set a watch outside Cersei's, and told them that they must never do that again, or she would have no choice but to tell their father. They need not have feared, though, as it was not long after that she died giving birth to Tyrion. So they had been discovered while still very young, and the twins were anxious about what Tywin's response would be if he had found out. But Tywin wasn't told at that time because, as it happens, they weren't together all that much over the next few years, so there wasn't really anything to hide but their desires. Jaime left a squire for King Craig Hall for 4 years from the age of 11, and 2 years later Cersei was taken to King's Landing by her father, apparently with the hope of marrying her to a Targaryen, either Rhaegar if the ill-fated Elia died, or even Viserys. At least that's what Jaime thought at the age of 15. Just after Jaime had been knighted, he met her in King's Landing on his way back to Casterly Rock, and they devised a plan for him to be made a member of the Kingsguard, which would keep Jaime in King's Landing near her. That worked, since by that point King Aerys was looking for any opportunity to get one over on Tywin, and jumped at the chance to have Jaime give up his claim to inherit Casterly Rock. Shockingly for the twins, Tywin responded by resigning as Hand of the King and moving back to Casterly Rock, taking Cersei with him, while Jaime was now tied to King's Landing. There followed 2 years, including Robert's Rebellion, where they were separated once more. It was only with Cersei's marriage to Robert Baratheon after the war that they were in the same place again and could restart their relationship. There were, of course, odd moments in those years when they were together, but by and large they were separated from the ages of 11 to around 18. Then for the next 15 years or so, they were together in King's Landing as king and member of the Kingsguard. Cersei made a point of refusing to go on Robert's standard hunting trips, so she might stay in the Red Keep with Jaime. Of course, all this time Tywin was in Casterly Rock. I'm sure Tywin had his spies in King's Landing, but would any of them dare suggest to him what Jaime and Cersei were up to if they found out? We don't know, but I suspect not. Tywin wasn't exactly forgiving when it came to allegations against his family. Maybe a few rumors did reach his ears hundreds of miles away, but he certainly didn't do anything about it. And it needs to be said that even if he had wanted to during Robert's reign, he couldn't have separated them. Jaime was a member of the Kingsguard, and Cersei was Robert's wife, so the king had authority over them both, not Tywin. Then the war begins. Cersei remains in King's Landing while Jaime heads to Casterly Rock, then out into the field. He fights a couple of battles, gets captured and imprisoned, is released by Cat, and then makes his slow way south to King's Landing, arriving sometime around January of the year 300, a week after Joffrey's death at the Purple Wedding. Tywin dies less than a month later, and most of that month is consumed by Tyrion's trial. So when you look at it, Tywin was not actually a witness to any of the time his 2 eldest children spent together as adults. He certainly hadn't spent any significant time with both of them together for 22 years or more, which is to say that by the start of the story, Tywin either had no idea what was going on or had heard some rumors and ignored them. But that clearly couldn't remain the case once we get into the main story of A Song of Ice and Fire, and it's notable that the number of people within the Lannister inner circle in the Red Keep who either know or strongly believe that incest was real is impressive. For example, Kevin Lannister, Tywin's brother and probably closest confidant, says this to Jaime when Jaime wonders why he isn't being named Hand of the King. "Your sister knows my terms, they have not changed." Tell her the next time you're in her bedchamber." Sir Kevin put his heels into his courser and jogged ahead, putting an abrupt end to their discussion. Jaime let him go, his missing sword hand twitching. He had hoped against hope that Cersei had somehow misunderstood, but plainly that was wrong. "He knows about the two of us, about Tommen and Maella, and Cersei knows he knows. And it's not just Kevin who knows. Pycelle does too, as do Tyrion, Littlefinger, and Varys. Plus, earlier Jon Arryn Stannis and Ned. It seems as though almost everyone in those circles in King's Landing actually knew and kept it from Robert Baratheon and presumably Tywin himself, and then Stannis and Robb spread the story even further to the extent that Jaime even wonders whether it is now so well known he might as well give up the pretense entirely. Perhaps Stan and Baratheon, and the Starks had done him a kindness. He thinks they had spread their tale of incest all over the 7 kingdoms, so there was nothing left to hide. Why shouldn't I marry Cersei openly, and share her bed every night? The dragons always married their sisters, so although Tywin can reasonably be thought of not to have known when they were children because Joanna said she wouldn't tell him, and then she died, and actually nothing was going on other than rare fleeting meetings until much later. By the time he arrives in King's Landing, Tywin does unambiguously know about the allegations. Does he believe it? He has a family meeting of sorts at one point with just Cersei, Kevin and Tyrion, at which he refers to the allegations as disgusting slander, and he goes on to talk about how to counter them. His solution is for Cersei to marry again, suggesting Willis Tyrell. She protests, but Tywin ignores her. Interestingly, we see it all from Tyrion's point of view, who has this intriguing thought process while watching on. There is Jaime to consider. Their brother had been much younger when Cersei wed the first time. He might not acquiesce to a second marriage quite so easily. The unfortunate Willis Tyrell was likely to contract a sudden, fatal case of sore-through bowels, which could rather sour the alliance between Highgarden and Casterly Rock. "I should say something, but what?" "Pardon me, father, but it's our brother she wants to marry." Tyrion doesn't voice that thought, but him thinking it heavily implies that he doesn't think his father believes the rumors. Regardless, it's a simple fact that Tywin never seemingly confronts either Cersei or Jaime about the rumors. Perhaps he didn't want to hear the answer, or perhaps he thought it beneath him even to ask. Either way, if you look at his actions, not just his words, it seems like he was looking to swiftly separate the twins and keep them apart for the sake of appearances. If nothing else, Cersei marrying Willis would mean her moving to Highgarden, and Tywin also tried to order Jaime to Casterly Rock. So where does all this leave us? For most of their lives, Tywin can plausibly be believed not to have known what was going on, understandably, because he was never a close father. It would seem perhaps he had heard reports or a rumor, but there was no reason for him to believe it. But by the time he arrived in King's Landing, he definitely had heard the rumor, and took it seriously. At least he took seriously the need to combat it publicly. And here's the key point: we only see Tywin's public face on this. He had to not just be seen to deny the rumors, but be appalled by them, even when he was just with his family. You know how many spies there are in the Red Keep. Why? Because the family's entire power and reputation rested on the accusation being incorrect. Joffrey, then Tommen's claim to the throne came from being Robert Baratheon's sons, not Jaime's, so whatever Tywin might have thought in private, he had to pretend in public that he didn't believe it, but in private, well, we don't have a POV chapter for him, so unless George or Martin says something, we'll never know for sure. But given that we know how intelligent and insightful he is, and how literally almost everyone else around him believed it, Kevin, Tyrion, Pycelle, Varys, Littlefinger and so on, I personally find it hard to believe that he didn't at the very least suspect that there was some truth to the rumors, which meant that either he just kept that to himself for pragmatic reasons, or there was something more complex psychologically going on. Indisputably, there are some layers going on here. First, Tywin himself had married family, not his sister but his first cousin Joanna, his uncle's daughter, and he had for years served as hand to the king to Aerys, who had married his sister. Aerys had been Tywin's close friend and then rival. Second, there are persistent thoughts that perhaps Cersei and Jaime might not have been Tywin's children but King Aerys's. I covered that in another video, if you're interested, but if Tywin even suspected it might be true, it might explain their incest to him. They were Targaryens or part Targaryens, but if people knew that, then they would know what had happened in his own marriage, and it would make Tyrion the child he loathed his only trueborn son complicated. Third, we have to acknowledge that Tywin was capable of mental gymnastics when it came to his public stance on an issue: private behavior and family. He was vitriolic in his anger at Tyrion's use of sex workers, but at the death was caught with Shae, Tyrion's lover, naked in his bed. Many fans also believe the secret tunnel to a brothel from the Tower of the Hand was also his. He accepted Jaime's elevation to the Kingsguard, but personally never gave up on the idea that Jaime remained his heir nonetheless. He repeatedly harangued his children with talk of their duty to marry or remarry to support the Lannister cause, but himself stayed unmarried for decades after the death of his own wife. In fact, there's probably also a bit of overcompensation going on here, and layers of pain about the death of his wife in giving birth to Tyrion, all of which I'm sure the psychologists among us will be able to provide detailed analyses of. But at heart, there is a simple truth here with this complex man. Tywin Lannister was a hypocrite. Maybe he knew about Jaime and Cersei and didn't care. Maybe he didn't believe it. It actually doesn't matter, because he knew what he had to be like in public. For him, it was about the image of House Lannister, not an objective moral stance. But what do you think? Let me know. See more videos like this, diving into the world of A Song of Ice and Fire.